that I know of.
So we get a little farther out, a little farther out.
Yeah, probably would be.
Maybe swing up there after this.
Oh, yeah, somebody else came in those last 3 days.
About 8:30 having arrived. I call this meeting of the Trempealeau County Property Committee meeting to order. We have a 13-item agenda. Certification of open meeting laws have been met by proper posting. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
We'll make a motion to adopt the 13-item agenda.
I'll second it.
A motion and a second.
I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried.
Mr. Chair, are we online or?
We're on air.
That's the new
That's
sign.
on here.
She's
Okay, so we
ready.
should be using these.
Correct.
Good. Is that new?
That's new, it is.
It is new. I wouldn't have noticed either.
Minutes were distributed. I'll entertain a motion to adopt minutes as distributed.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Carried. We have a public comment period. It's a 15-minute block of time to comment on today's agenda items. Public comment period may be extended or curtailed at the discretion of the chair and after advisement by the committee. The number to call, 715-538-1770. We will proceed with the agenda and take calls as they come. Next, Samuel's group.
Morning, everyone. Give you an update on several things and how they're progressing. We don't have any change orders to review today, but we do have some that will be in progress for February. Nothing that's extremely large at this point, but just some small details that we're working through, some pricing, and Kurt will have them ready for us on February. But I do want to begin to bring you guys up to speed. There was an incident on the job site before the holidays where a coworker found another worker passed out. Ambulance was called. Ambulance came to the job site. The individual was then taken to the hospital, and then 3 days later did pass away. It was due to cardiac arrest. It was not job related in regards to safety elements, and there is investigation right now as to what the cause of that cardiac arrest was. But due to HIPAA requirements, we don't know many more details on that, but we do anticipate that that will be forthcoming as we move forward. But it wasn't safety related to the job site, but I did want to make you aware of that, and that we will stay on top of that information. And as more information is available that can be shared, we'll definitely bring that to you. But it isn't an impact to our ODIP element because it wasn't safety related, but it is one of those things that we need to deal with at this point. And obviously, HIPAA has some requirements there as to what we can and can't know. So tough to be able to take that information.
Mr. Chair, I think it may be appropriate, I'll state it that way, that the board extend its condolence to the family, if that's appropriate. So I would, I guess, pass that on to Paul, if I may, if there could be an extension of our condolences to his or her family.
Sure. Yep. And I'm actually working with Rick and Emeyer just from the legality perspective of ODIP and all of that. So as we work through that information, I'll make sure I bring it back here to the committee and then to the full board. But absolutely, I'll communicate that to the group.
Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate that. The next thing is just want to talk briefly about schedule. So we had planned to meet on December 22nd with Deb and her staff to go over the floor plan for the renovation. We had inclement weather that day, so we had to cancel that meeting date. That meeting has been rescheduled for today at 10 o'clock. So from 10 to 1, Venture will be meeting with Deb and her staff to go over the layout of that first floor to make sure that we have enough space there to kind of bring you guys all back. We had found a way to minimize the impact. There was not enough square footage or space there for the human services side, so that meeting will happen today from 10 to 1. And my goal is then to bring a floor plan to you to the next property meeting that we're able to review, and then we can approve it or reject that if we want to move that into some pricing components that are there. So, overall schedule, we have weekly foremans and progress meetings with contractors. Last week, some of the contractors had informed us that they have concerns about manpower availability to be able to meet the end dates with the time that's remaining. I'm not panicking yet, but when we start to hear that from contractors, it's something that we have to have a focus on. So we're going to refocus on given areas to make sure that we do have the staff available. What is compounding is some of our contractors that started some of the early work didn't have enough manpower to meet some of their deadlines, and it's now rolling over to the contractors that follow them. So we're going to continue to push forward with the schedule, but with that information, now we need to really start to hone in on some smaller pieces, and our team is working with the contractors to work on that. So nothing that we're making any adjustments at this point, but just to let you know that that has been raised by the contractors and components that are tied back to that. FF&E, fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. The sheriff is working with his staff in regards to the furniture and the equipment needs. Kurt and I are actually going to meet with the sheriff this morning. They've got a preliminary list put together. We need to identify that list, and obviously we're going to be tying it back to that FF&E budget that we referred to. So we're close to bringing something to you, targeting that February we'll have that list for you with some dollar amounts, and then we can prioritize what does that FF&E list look like in use of that money that's been established for the budget on the FF&E. Change orders, like I said, there's nothing today. We do have some small ones that we're dealing with on some structural steel details and some other elements with building envelope components, but we'll have them to you for February. So, other than that, things are moving along well. I think you asked, how are we progressing? We're actually painting in part of the cell block right now. So we do have the building is tempered, the second floor slab has been poured. Masons are up there starting to do some of the walls up there and framing. If you walk through, you see a lot of the framing on that first floor is completed. They're going to be backing out. The masonry will be done in the cell block this week, and then they've got some support in the support areas, the kitchen and the laundry area. Some block walls still need to be ran up, but it's moving along well inside. So, you have a question, Adi?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, how much, on the fixtures, how much of the stuff from this existing jail, like desks and stuff, they should be able to use most of those in the...
Well, that's what we're evaluating, because some of them have lived their life. There are some of them that we can reuse. I would say that the amount that we can reuse is limited, just because of how old it is. But we'll have it broke out for you of which spaces will be reused, which ones won't be. So, yeah. Other questions? Comments? I was hopeful that we would have something to you for that design. I apologize that the weather delayed that, but we'll get that design nailed down. I think Deb is leaving on vacation starting tomorrow, and she's back on the 20th. So we wanted to get the meeting today so that Venture can work on some of their designs, so that when she gets back, we can get some drafts in front of her and her staff, and then obviously bring it back to you, the committee. So that's all I have, Dan, unless you guys have questions.
Any questions for Kurt? Thank you, Kurt.
Again, you're welcome to tour out there. If you want to come out there and see how things are progressing, please stop by the job site, and that way you can take a tour of the site.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Robertson.
Morning. All right, update. We have received most of the components for our data center upgrade and most of the networking components for the new building, and the network refresh upgrade. We worked with the provider of those components. They're providing professional services to help us with that, and had meetings in late December and then last week, and we feel like we have a good plan in place. We've gone ahead and racked the new data center components. It's a much smaller footprint than what was originally expected, so that's kind of nice. We're currently trying to figure out how to get redundant power into it so that we don't roast the equipment before we even get it in production. Expect that we'll have a core network component and a core, or not a core switch, but a regular switch that's part of the new networking solution, and the data center equipment all set up and running in a test environment so staff can play with it by the end of February into March, somewhere in there. And then we will be able to migrate those elements over to the new Justice Center as soon as the space is available to us. And then hopefully that'll be a seamless transition into migrating our production loads over onto this new redundant data center solution. Phones is our biggest issue right now. This week we'll be spending time trying to figure out how to do training to the staff on the MLK Day training. We have an hour block set aside for training on the new phone system. Unfortunately, the Zoom people have that day off, so all the people that were going to do it for us are not able to. So Kathy and I are going to have to work something out to do it on ourselves. The phone process, as the county clerk can attest, is a really big challenge in that there's a lot of things that have been set up for a long time, and it's very, very much more complicated than I ever imagined. So that's our primary tussle, because we really want to go live on March 1st. And that's most of what I have for today. And that's all of it, actually.
Anticipation when you can set that equipment up in the new building?
Well, they're gone now, but we've been planning from day one, based on what they've told us, to expect sometime around August that we would start be able to have access to the spaces, and they were hoping to have some of the like dispatch moves happen next fall, so that's what we're preparing for, is a September go live, but I don't know how that actually is going to shake out. We have all the switches that are ready to go into the new space. We have the core components that are ready to go into the new space. So having that configured, and we can start replacing some of the equipment here, that should be, it's good to have some time with the equipment before it's production, because it's a brand new system for all of us, and we got to learn how to configure it and manage it properly.
That way you can plug and play it when it is time.
Yeah, it's much better to have a sandbox than to wait till everybody's counting on it every day and then try and play with it and figure out what you're doing right and wrong.
Who's putting all the access points in the new building? Is that part of the contract, or?
That's part of the contract. We purchased them as part of that networking equipment that was approved in my budget last year. We had an anticipation of a certain amount of access points, and so we have many more drops configured than what we're actually going to purchase, because we just couldn't. There was like 85 access points in the new building, and we're just, no. So we went through and we selected spots we felt would be acceptable. And of course, once you get into the space, and you'll have some spaces that have too much steel in the walls and nothing works. So we're anticipating a few that'll have to be adjusted, but the design included planning for expansion, changes to workflow, and all
And the
that.
cabling will all be there, so it's just a matter of hooking it up.
The cabling, we have drops everywhere, so we should be good. And we purchased networking equipment that delivers power through the network cable, and went with a considerable amount of power in each switch. So we future-proofed the organization that way, and that if we're having to deliver what's called PoE devices, we have plenty of capacity there as well.
Anybody have anything else for Tim?
Just,
This particular question isn't perhaps have much meaning to anyone, but the cabling, is the electrician who runs all the cabling, or who does all that?
They have different contractors for the different elements. There'll be
Okay, there-
electricians dealing with the delivery of power drops, and then you're going to have low voltage cabling contractor, probably subcontracted with B&B. So yes,
It's a specialty then.
that's
Mhm.
all they're gonna have miles of Cat 6 running through that place.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. Jeremy?
All right, so it was a thankfully fairly uneventful month for maintenance, so nothing too drastic, nothing too crazy. The biggest issue that we had out at the impound shed that the sheriff maintains out at the healthcare center, there's two forms of heat out there. There's a furnace and then there's an in-floor heat system, a boiler system out there. The boiler that runs that died. There's a hole in the heat exchanger. When I reached out to the manufacturer of that company, they stopped supporting it like 6 months after it was installed into that building, so they make no parts, they make no anything for it. I did have enough money left in the line item that I had for that particular building. I bought a new boiler before the end of last year. That was already delivered to Winona Heat and Vent, and they'll be bringing it out on a truck with the next delivery for the construction building next door. So I should have it at some point this week. We'll go swap that out and get that installed. And then dealing with the sheriff, what I decided to do too is I had an extra mini split unit, which is what I was putting in the radio towers throughout the county this year. I'm going to install one of those out there as well in case we have another issue with heating or cooling, so that the active evidence room stays at a certain consistent temperature, low humidity, stuff like that. So other than that, there was the only other thing that I'm working on now to hopefully have in place before the new building is set is a new key management system, so I can get rid of the antiquated 6 coffee cans full of keys that I inherited when I was hired. So I'll be having that hopefully in place before the new building is completed. So right now I just have everything, updated with tags and keys, and I sign out keys to people when they get hired. But yeah, essentially for those that were new when I was put in place, I was handed 6 coffee cans full of keys with no list of where they go, and none of the doors are marked for what keys work on that particular door. So it was a lot of trial and error at that point. So
Jeremy?
yes, sir.
The boiler at the impound shed, that just supports the east end, or just the evidence room on the east end?
It supports the main tempered side. So yeah, it would be the
And
east side, the
closest
east side
to
of the
the
building.
white
So and again, for those that aren't aware, there's one long pole shed out there that's evidence that's split into essentially 3 rooms. One is a cold storage area where there's no temperature control at all, and then there's vehicles and stuff like that that are kept out there. Then there's another larger area that has in-floor heat and a furnace, and that one they have certain vehicles that are kept over there, whether that's like the ERT vehicle and a few other active, maybe case vehicles. And then there's a smaller active evidence room that has a wall-mounted air conditioner inside of it, but the in-floor heat is what supports that room too. And when that boiler goes out for the in-floor heat, then that room is not really temperature controlled the best. So, which would be where I'm going to put the mini split into that room. But like I said, with the boiler right now is working, but we have to fill it up with glycol pretty much on a weekly basis if we needed to right now to keep it working because of the amount that's leaking out of the heat exchanger. Other than that, I've had no other issues or concerns in the past month. Hopefully we stay that way going forward. So, any questions for me? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Discussion, possible action regarding televising and recording of all meetings. At some point in my brief career as a county board supervisor, I thought I heard that the intent was to televise all meetings. And from where I stand, that hasn't really been followed through with some of the concerns that arise if we're going to televise all meetings, which is building security and staffing the TV studio to televise all meetings. So it all comes down to money. And personnel to staff the facility in the eventuality that, well, we have meetings at any particular time, any particular day of the week. So I think some of the issues that have popped up are out of the TV studio, and the 3 people that work there, difficulty covering all the meetings. Well, that's the rumor anyway. I've not seen the schedule per se and been able to sit down with a timesheet to see, how that would work, but it seems like we need to implement a change one way or the other. Can't just leave it, Is this the appropriate committee? I would imagine we can, at the very least, make a recommendation to a full board or another committee to make the recommendation. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I don't know, does anybody know the percentage of people in Trumpealeau County that even have access to us?
At one time, I was under the impression that there were around 9,000 hookups to cable in this county, but that's stale. That's maybe close to 20 years ago.
So it's less than that now for sure, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if it would be less or more, or the same.
It's just so
I guess
many more options. I'm thinking, I shouldn't say. I guess I don't know.
Well, my understanding is that via computer, we can pull this up at any time.
It's streamed.
It's streamed, so I think
Okay, we could be more
basically
than-
anybody who
okay,
has computer
okay,
hookup or cable hookup would have access. And I think there are obviously 2 departments that are affected, and Tim, you're still here, and in the television station, and those 2 departments that are most affected. And I guess, though we discussed it somewhat last month, I guess it would be good to have Tim and our director, that isn't the right term for our, what's the right term, Paul, for our TV?
He's the TV director.
It is director, okay. Yeah, to hear from them. To hear from them but I think if we're serious about having this live to the public, I think it should be in the form of resolution, because it wasn't prior to this, was it? It wasn't a resolution.
I am not aware of a resolution, and I think we have someone ready to give us information regarding this topic. Drew?
Hello, may I speak, Mr. Chair?
You certainly may.
Hi. For those of you who don't know, I'm Drew Martin. I work at the TV studio. If you had watched a couple of meetings ago with UW Extension, we had a PowerPoint breaking down a lot of the statistics regarding our viewership for our YouTube channel and our Facebook. So if you would like to go back and watch that, it'll tell you pretty much a lot of what you need to know. All I can tell you off the top of my head is somewhere we're over 200 subscribers at the moment, and it is climbing about, 10 subscribers every couple weeks, every month, somewhere in there, since we've started it. So it is going up, but the amount of cable subscriptions with TCC are going down, if that's of any help to
Now, when
you.
you talk about subscribers, is that to
Our YouTube channel.
YouTube?
Yep.
Okay.
But that doesn't indicate the number of people who are watching. Those are just subscribers.
Those are just subscribers, correct.
Do you know the count of the numbers that are pulling it up?
No, that I do not know.
Okay.
Can I watch without being a subscriber?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Can you send us that link to that PowerPoint presentation?
It is currently on YouTube. I believe it is on the November UW Extension meeting. I think it's November. I can't. It's fuzz. Time blurs. So.
And if we pull up the YouTube, there'll be a listing of the various programs.
Mm-hmm. All the meetings, all the interviews, miscellaneous shows that we produce, not everything that's on the channel, because some things on the channel we're not allowed to stream because of certain rights, especially when polka music is concerned. Because we're not licensed for that kind of thing like we are. There's certain things that are covered on cable that are not covered on YouTube, especially when it concerns music. So we don't stream polka. And also, one thing that was discussed earlier this year, or excuse me, last year, because it was 2022, at the February 2022 meeting is when Mr. Schreiner, who was the chair of that committee at the time before the election, established the policy of hours which we record meetings, if you would like to go back and watch that as well.
And was that like 9 o'clock till?
It was officially 9 to, I believe, 3 as it was passed. So if that's something you want to revisit, possibly changing in the future, that's something you'd probably want to bring up with them.
Yeah. And again, that was, I don't think that was by resolution.
So does anybody have the minutes? Paul, maybe you can get somebody to pull up the minutes from the board meeting, however far back that said whatever they said about this subject, and then we can use that as a basis to go forward.
I believe the meeting must start between 9 and 3, with the exception of the county board meeting.
Well, that one, but what was the discussion and outcome of, are we going to make it mandatory for all meetings, committees, and otherwise be
Well, I would,
live?
if I may, a lot of this was brought up because of during COVID, because people couldn't come into the building or did not want to come into the building. So that necessitated the broadcast of a lot of the committees. We did almost all the committees, as a matter of fact, but we've kind of scaled back on that because we've been trying to get in more community things. And when we were asked to record all of the meetings, that didn't leave a lot of time for us to go out to Ashley for the Arts or other events at like Blair Cheese Fest or Whitehall Beef and Dairy Days and those kind of things. So that we're limited there, and that's kind of why we have the policy the way we do. And we only have 2.5 people and a couple volunteers, so.
So, Chair, there's something else I think we should discuss with regard to whether we do or don't. Maybe we should just table that for the time being until we find out more information from what the meetings were in the past, in the minutes. But we have the ability with the tablets that we have, every one of us have one. We have the ability to bring it with us and log in and have a meeting without anybody from the TV studio here. Okay, so we could come up with a process and a meeting request that had the right links that everybody would punch in, and the chair or secretary or somebody can hit record, and we can record every meeting. And it could be posted to the YouTube channel or however we want to post it out there, put on the website, that sort of thing. It could also be a live meeting as well, and it could be published in however we advertise the meetings, and people could punch in and go that way as well. So,
But are you sure you want to give that link to everyone in the public, especially if they're going to make obnoxious comments about things they don't agree with you on? That's a point I would make.
All of those things would need to be taken into consideration, but we could lock down things so that, the public could view and not comment or whatever. Those things can be done. I'm just suggesting that might be part of a solution to what it feels like a huge issue with regard to, okay, which room are we going to be in? Do we have the right cameras? Do we have the people to support it and all that sort of thing? We could, in other words, kind of self-support it ourselves yes, it would take a little bit of effort for some who aren't as technologically savvy these days to do it, but it can be done. Is Tim still here? Would I be accurate in that statement?
Supervisor Arsh, I believe you are accurate in that assessment. However, there's a lot of moving parts in this particular proposal you're putting together, and the whole process is likely to change once we bring all these meeting rooms online in the new facility, and we have all the cameras and the setup and whatever's going to happen with the new county boardroom. I think we're going to be reinventing the wheel a little bit during that. And I can tell you the next 9 months, my department is not really interested in going in depth on getting you guys all set up to be able to self-record your meetings. We've got some real mountains to climb, and I really don't want to go off on a side trail with that, if you don't mind.
Well, my point in bringing it up is that the technology exists where
The
it is
technology
possible,
exists.
where we wouldn't have to add any cost and have the ability to do live stream for every committee that has a meeting. That is possible. We just have to come up with the right process.
Right, and that's where it gets into the weeds, because processes here are oftentimes governed by things that require council's input. The things that he mentions about the public having links, it took a long time to come up with this packet process, because we have bureaucratic rules that have to be followed, and therefore we can't just leverage the technology in the easiest way. We have to make it difficult. So, sorry. I don't want to rain in your parade. I think it's a great idea, but I have concerns.
If I could, I agree, and my opinion is that my initial response is, if the technology is available, we should take steps to put it to use. That doesn't necessarily happen quickly, and as Tim so rightfully stated, currently, we've got a lot of stuff on our plate. If we know this is possible, and I'm one of those people from the pre-computer generation that, once I'm done playing here, and people like me, we'll have less and less issues with, my brain screams, what? Can do what? And fewer people will, as time progresses, will be screaming like that. So this is something that I see occurring in the future at some point. We're aware that this is possible and that we should really be working in that direction. But in light of the fact that both the TV studio and IT are limited in what we're asking them to do due to the staffing levels, that we keep this in mind, and as we move in that direction. We can look back at the minutes and the meetings that have occurred to see where we decided we should be currently, and then take steps from there. Drew?
Yeah, just FYI too, I think part of the reason we came up with that 9 to 3 policy was also because IT is not available outside of those hours, except for maybe on a county board night. So if something does go wrong with a particular broadcast, we have to have access to them to help us fix the problem.
And I have maybe talked too much about that. I think there has to be a much closer involvement between the TV studio and IT as we move into the future, because they are joined at the hip. You look like you want to say something.
I'm being thoughtful. I think I'd like an opportunity to speak with my team before I say anything further. I think just the idea that Mr. Orsh brings up is worthy of discussion, and so we could take some time and talk as a little group, and I imagine WTCO can do the same, and then maybe next month's property meeting we can come back with better answers to what's possible with the technology and what's easy and what is actually going to take some time, rather than just speaking off the cuff here.
And I think that it would be an excellent idea. some of the information presented today I was not aware of prior to this moment. So it changes the way I look at how I feel we should progress. So if I don't hear any arguments, we'll put this on the agenda for next month, and we'll have, and Kevin and Rick? Process it
Well,
out?
Rick's watching, so he knows, yeah.
Okay. But, and then we can come back at the next February's property meeting and for further discussion, possible action. Thank you both.
May I add something here?
Sure.
I think that the consulting back and forth and discussing this is important, but as Tim is suggesting, there is a limited amount of time to be looking at new technology, and anything of that nature it appears like it's not going to be very feasible until we're in the new building and the IT has a good handle on the new equipment that will be installed and making sure everything's up and running. So I guess I would suggest that maybe that end of it, the new technology or a different technology, maybe we need to let them talk about it, but let's not spend a lot of time on it. Because there's nothing we can do. We can say, yeah, we want to do this in a year or whatever, but that's up in the air. It's good to know that. It doesn't suit some of us old fogies particularly well, but and I'm not including you in that, Dan, by any sense of the imagination.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you to a certain extent. I think discussion at next month's meeting will help to dictate timing issue. Because I don't, personally, I don't have the information I need to feel comfy about setting any kind of schedule on how this would be planned and/or implemented, so.
Well, this is be some really initial, early discussion, very early discussion. So I guess I don't know that we don't want to put a lot of pressure. There's, as Tim has reported, they're very much involved in the other things going on, and the television station. It's just difficult to. I think it's important that we are out to the public, but it's just difficult right now. So.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is we got to decide or find out what was decided in terms of us being required to be live streamed. Was that an issue? Are we not in compliance with whatever was decided before? We need to find that out, and then move forward with what's our policy and how are we going to support that policy. To your point, the technology exists in our hands today to do exactly what I said. So think of it this way. Just give you this something to ponder. If something happened and the courthouse was closed today, we could still have this meeting. We would all go at home. We would get our tablet. We would log in, and we would be live together. My suggestion is that live link would be broadcast to the public in a way so that they could click it and listen in. Mm-hmm. It exists right now today. We don't have to buy anything. We don't have to add any other thing. There's a process behind it that would need to be vetted through and make sure we're doing things right and we're not putting stuff out to the public that we shouldn't be. But I don't think that there's a lot of equipment or things that we would need to purchase in order to do that.
You're correct. The equipment component, you're absolutely right. The software we're using to make that happen is a business class license where all the participants are equal.
Yeah.
Inviting the public is a webinar product that we don't own.
Right, so you're talking about Teams versus whenever we do a county board meeting where we use
Recording in Teams and then getting that uploaded, that's not going to happen in real time to the public. And then our Zoom licenses are all meeting licenses. We don't do the webinar component. So as was spoken before, Yahoos would be able to take that link, jump in and bang pots and pans or do whatever they'd like. We don't have the version of the Zoom license that does that.
But we could purchase that. There would be a cost to it. The offset could be, well, do you need the staffing in the television room to do that, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think I think what we're looking at is implementation. You're suggesting we do the equipment, but the implementation is the demanding thing, right?
Yeah, the process. It's
Yeah,
the process
yeah.
of how we do it. That
Yeah,
is
yeah,
gonna be,
yeah. So I guess I don't want to, I guess what I'm suggesting is that we don't want to put too much on the staff prior to getting up and running, I guess, in the new building. But I think we need to be looking at those options. I agree with you there.
yeah, I mean, there's no rush on this. There's
Yeah.
certainly no rush,
Yeah.
right?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think it'd be good, I think it's good to have these meetings shown, because I hear a lot of positive feedback on them. A lot of people do watch these. You wouldn't believe it, but they do. And it's good that when public's involved in the politics, they know what's going on. But I think if Tim and the TV station get together and maybe come up with like a game plan, or something you can live with, something they can live with, and we can kind of work around it, maybe put it together. Yeah, we don't have much information here really to really make a resolution or even start to make a resolution, you know.
And it doesn't just involve the TV studio and us. Paul's office has to coordinate all the actions of the board members as well. So
But-
we can't exclude him from that
Yeah,
conversation.
and that's the thing, we gotta get everybody involved. If you guys can have meetings or communications in the next month. And I do have one question for you, Tim, is if we just do the, what you was saying about the meetings on the computer, and we just put it out there on YouTube, does that open the whole system up to maybe somebody coming through a back door or something like that, you know?
No.
We're safe that way?
He's broadcasting. It's not a two-way communication. So then they broadcast to YouTube. It's just
But if
going
we
out.
just did it like on our tablets, like you were saying, like Dave was saying.
I'd have to see what specifically you were attempting to cut. If you were just going to have a Teams meeting and recording it, we download the file and then but we wouldn't do that real time.
Yeah, we couldn't do it live on here.
Well, it could be done, but I wouldn't recommend it.
It's a good point. So as part of our decision-making process, we should decide whether we want it to be live or just recorded and posted after the fact. That's two whole different, how do you do?
And I think for subcommittees, I think you'd be satisfied with recording and publishing, because the live interaction isn't as necessary as, maybe somebody's watching a county board meeting on a Monday night and, oh my God, I got to get involved in this process, and they make a phone call. But I don't feel like you're going to have a lot of phone calls into the property committee meeting on Monday mornings after the Packers lose or anything like that. Yeah, apparently.
That's an opinion.
Yeah, they were there.
Well, and that kind of, it's not just IT and TV and clerk's office. If we have meetings that we want to televise that are here and open to the public, the security of the building is a component that needs to be paid attention to as well. And that leads us into the next item on the agenda, discussion and possible action on meeting room policy and security.
Did you guys get the policy? Did that get sent out, do you know, Sam?
I did not see it.
I made copies.
This is the meeting room policy you're distributing?
Yes. And I'll kind of give you a little background on, it was a county board
Thank you.
supervisor was asking about the meeting rooms when they're scheduled and stuff like that. And so, had to make sure that there was security here when those meetings were happening. And I had contacted Brett too, and I thought, I got one extra. Microphone? Oh, no. Okay. So everything I just said?
I don't.
Maybe it came through as I was walking past different microphones.
Yep.
But anyway, I did talk to Brett, and Brett thought that it should be a property and law enforcement joint meeting to talk about not only us scheduling rooms when we do, was to have security here. And like I said, there was a county board supervisor that asked kind of the policy of all that. And the policy that I just handed out kind of says we schedule rooms. We do schedule rooms for the public also. And then, of course, there was asked the question, how do those people from the public get in? There's usually a person that is a county employee or county board supervisor that has let people in for those special meetings. Doesn't go through security because security isn't here at those times. So, I mean, it's something we got to talk about.
Mr. Chair, interesting enough that you brought that. I was supposed to get a hold of Mr. Schreiner from University Extension. I've got the exact same policy.
You got it.
And I was supposed to get with you at some point because you're head of law enforcement meeting, or committee. And feel they're being shut out.
And that was one of the
So
reasons.
Extension offices?
One of the agents had a meeting, and he stood at the front door and let everybody in because it was after 5 o'clock. Actually, it was after 4:30, but I mean, he just stood by the door and let everybody in that were going to go to that meeting. Once they were all in, of course, there was no security, they just all came in. We also had the Trempealeau County Fair Board came and has their annual meeting here. Well, 2 of those members on the Fair Board, one is a county board supervisor, one is a member of the law enforcement office. And so they were letting people in. That shoots our security. That's the thing that I thought law enforcement and property should get together and talk about how we're going to handle those things.
And I concur. The discussion that begs attention is the security issue. There's, and it slowly over time, the scales are tipping to, because Paul and I have been around long enough at security. What's the big deal? I mean, the doors used to be open all the time. And then, I hear repeatedly that, well, that can't happen here. And it goes beyond that, because one of the main issues with this new building is going to be, are employees going to be screened on a daily basis like the public is? Because historically, employees are involved in a high percentage of tragic incidents that occur in courthouses. So I agree we need to make decisions regarding meeting rooms because of the security issue, but I think maybe that needs to be closely attached to a decision regarding security overall, not just meeting room policy, because that security policy is going to dictate how this looks to a certain degree. Doc?
Yeah, isn't this another one? Sounds like we're pushing everything down the road. Isn't this another issue to wait 9 months till we have in a new building with a new security? Otherwise, we're gonna.
I think until then, we're going to need to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. As we hear complaints and issues pop up, we'll have to deal with them. But I have a tendency to agree with you on the security issue especially, because it's, well, I've got opinions on it, and I'm sure other people have opinions that may or may not align with mine. So is property committee the committee that's going to deal with security in the new facility initially?
Probably not. It'd probably still be the sheriff, but the meeting rooms would still be under you.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a coordination there. And one thing I would like to ask is that I can update this one thing because it's got the wrong email address in there. That's my old,
Yeah,
that's my
by all-
old.
And I don't
address.
think you should have to rely on committee okay to change,
Cosmetic?
yeah,
Okay.
like dates and email addresses and changes. Therefore, in order to stay current, I think we need to have that occur without waiting for a monthly meeting.
Now, do we know if the new meeting rooms can be, what should I say?
Access.
Accessed, or can you only access a given area and the rest of the building's locked down? Do we know that?
Can I address that? Looking at the plans that they have, in the renovation, they have my office back up on second floor where public health is. It got moved when there was a whole bunch of shuffling and all, but now treasurer and county clerk are back up where child support and public health are at this point. It can change again. But right across the hall from that are 3 meeting rooms now planned, plus the county boardroom. All of those would only have access coming in the front door, going to second floor, and, Jeremy, correct me, but they won't get any farther.
That should be how it's.
Yep. So all the meeting rooms will be accessed from just the front door and not be able to get any farther, like with Wisconsin room is now, that you would never get there because the doors would be locked between.
You know,
Same with the Trempealeau room won't be.
You know, this discussion went on 20 years ago in terms of how we could close off, and they started to close off some of the spaces. I think we need to have, I think we need to allow for certain usage at a variety of times through the day and evening, early evening. This has to be a meeting location, and you have staff like Extension that do have, and not just that one, but Public Health Department too, that do need to have evening opportunities. But I think, and I guess my feeling is we should plan for the idea that we will be, assuming these are secure facility or segregated or separate from the rest of the building, I think then the issue, if we can agree that we should be able to use it at various times, then we need to be talking to security about that.
Yep.
But I think, you know, I guess my belief is that you got to have a place for meetings to be held. This is why we're going through this whole process of allowing for separate access, so to speak. And I assume the restrooms are located in that region and,
They're in that entrance. Yep,
yeah, yeah.
right in the entryway.
Everybody in this county is gonna be paying for this new facility,
Absolutely.
so we gotta build some
Absolutely.
access.
We need that availability. To go out and rent a space would be totally crazy, but we may have to staff it with security.
I think what's happening, you know, with public health starts at 6 o'clock. I don't think there is any security for that one. Does the sheriff keep? There is, okay. I know with human services starting at 4 o'clock,
There is
you know,
someone,
everybody that should be going to the meeting at 4 o'clock will be there before the doors are locked at 4:30.
but I think there's been security there as we leave too, so.
As it sits right now, like tonight is it tonight, Human Services?
It's
Well,
canceled.
As it did sit, it starts before 4:30, but Travis would still be here until that meeting ended.
Yeah.
But some of the issues that some of these committees face too is when they're scheduling something after hours, someone needs to make sure they're reaching out to law enforcement to make sure that there's someone scheduled to be at the front door, because the deputies that are here now are from, 7 to 3:30, and then from 8:15 to 4:45. So if they're scheduled outside of that, someone from the sheriff's department needs to be made aware. My department also needs to be made aware, because the sheriff's department is the one that sits at the door, but I'm the one that sets all the locks. to have certain things unlocked. And if there was a UW Extension meeting after hours where they were sitting there, that was either one, because they came up with a mutually beneficial agreement with the sheriff's department that no one would be there, because a lot of times those deputies, from what I understand, are in overtime at that point to be here. So someone needs to pay for that. I didn't set the locks if I wasn't made aware, because there's no security at the front door. So a lot of those meetings are then happening in the Wisconsin room, so that whoever is in charge can actually see people coming up to the front door to let them in to the front entrance as it sits now. But in the new building, there's nobody, you're not at the front door. You're not going to see anybody coming in if you're in one of the meeting rooms on the second floor, even in the decor room as it sits now. You're not going to be seeing anyone come up. So, you know, in the time that I've been here, we've opened up the building to the public before, when it was Permar at the front door. We've had 4-H groups, Boy Scout groups, Girl Scout groups. We would open the back door for them to come in at a certain time. I would just make the jail staff or 911 dispatch aware that people were going to be coming in and out of the building. But even after hours before, when jail visitation was occurring, they would come in the back door here, go up to the second floor. But even with the way that the doors are locked, someone would come in to visit in the jail, but we would have to leave the basement unlocked, because that's where the public bathrooms were. But that's where also all the records are for, you know, human services, for court records and all this stuff. The doors are locked. We have cameras, but you still, you know, people still had access. So a lot of this stuff is still a matter of communication, letting somebody know. Last week, land management had an after-hours event for poster. So, and that was, she communicated with my department and the sheriff's department so that there were people here. Stuff like that just needs to happen so that they're not scrambling at the last minute as it sits right now.
So we need further discussion and maybe involve some other individuals before we can really come to a decision on this. Going into the next item, let's leave that on the agenda for the next property committee meeting, as well as the departmental updates and televising and recording of meetings. Anybody have anything else they'd like to see on next month's agenda?
Well, only that you may have to have a meeting of the minds with the law enforcement chair.
I was just going to mention that
Huh.
maybe have
That's gonna
somebody
be
from
tough.
there come to the property meeting. Well, we got a couple of members of the committee, but
Yeah. Do you think that, maybe not right away, but eventually we need a joint committee meeting? Anybody want to weigh in on that? Do you think February would be appropriate for a joint meeting, or do we need to kick this around the block a little bit before we get together? David?
As long as we have the information out to everybody beforehand, we could have a joint meeting, so we know what we're discussing.
who's chair of law? I was just going to say, I thought it was you. But unless you just want the sheriff here at your next property and then decide if
Yeah.
a joint needs to be.
But I
Because
think,
Let's go
Brett
that way.
Brett knows about it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Yeah.
so.
You heard pretty obvious, Dick and I are in favor of what we're thinking of, and maybe some of you aren't as so in favor of thinking we've got to get access for the public.
No, I
Do
agree.
you think that's
100%.
important, or are we on?
I think it's very important. I think historically, part of the issue that we as county supervisors have faced is lack of communication and the public either, you know, not being aware of how things run, whether it's due to lack of interest or lack of communication. And the first steps we need to take is making sure the public is able to participate. And this is a good way to do it. I'd like to talk to the school districts too about teaching civics again, but kind of falls on deaf ears. Nobody wants to learn that.
I think the big challenge is, a lot of organizations that would probably want access to the meeting rooms would be after hours.
Yes.
So because it's after hours, then you get into the point of, okay, if you have to have security, there's no getting around it. Do we have the ability to mandate our security personnel now to, oh, hey, somebody, reserved a room, you gotta be here, and we're willing to pay you overtime, but, really,
Yeah, I agree with that.
the cost of that should be considered, and $20, I suggest, is probably not the right fee, number one, to reserve it, because toilet paper and water and everything else and heat costs more than $20 probably for an hour meeting.
Yeah.
But security, both from a overtime and non-overtime standpoint, should be something that would be considered if we were going to even contemplate having after-hour meeting events at the building.
Well, and another thing, unfortunately, we need to deal with, other than the monetary aspect, is the body aspect. Do we have enough people to staff these? That's certainly becoming an issue with the TV studio, and when we want meetings televised, is do we have enough bodies around to do it the whole time? And we were speaking earlier about the old days, when your boss told you you needed to do it, you did it. Well, that does not translate well to the current situation. We have duties that need to be done and nobody around to actually accomplish that. So we need to just keep that in mind as we move forward.
Mr. Chair, yeah, one thing we should keep too, we talked about this before, but didn't go over very well, but the word flex, if we want to have the meetings at 8 or 8:30 like we talked, flex them, they can come in maybe an hour or a half hour earlier, and at night, if you're going to have somebody here later, if one of the officers' work start at 8 and the other one starts at 10, then he can flex the schedule to 5 or 6, whatever fits. That could be a possibility too. I know that's not a good word.
Can I interject there?
Sure.
Our employment policy gives every department head that ability. They can do that.
I thought that was something that we needed to revisit and actually change.
Well, the way it's
the
worded,
verbiage.
because we went and read it,
She said it's in the, she said it at the last meeting, remember you said it's in the handbook or?
Remember all of with the act, all of the new stuff that came in 20, when was that?
Is that in the
new
personnel
act,
handbook? Or?
Act 20, whatever it was.
Act 10.
40 means 40, you can't do that if you don't have enough employees to flex, they can't flex. You're supposed to be here when the courthouse is open between 8 and 4:30. Your supervisor can approve it, but if there isn't staff to cover the time that the courthouse is open, you can't do it.
Is that mandated or is that just suggested?
then our employment policy has to be changed because it doesn't say that. It just says work schedule, yep. Adjust work schedule, that's how it's
Right,
worded.
but if you only have 3 people in your office, and one of them's on vacation, and now you're asked to adjust it, but now somebody's not here in that open courthouse hours from 8 to 4:30. That's what I'm saying. How can they do it if they don't have staff to do it?
That's in
If
the,
we're required to have someone between 8 and 4:30.
That's
Our
county
office is supposed to be
policy?
open.
that's county policy? Is that where that?
It used to be,
listed?
if it's changed, I'm not aware of that, but.
We went and looked at the employment policy, and it's in that, they don't call it flex, it's adjusting the work schedule is what it is.
I'm just
So I'm
thinking-
thinking they would still have coverage from the 8 to 4:30, but maybe somebody is from 7:30 to 3, and the other one's noon to 8.
Yeah, I understand
know?
what
Yeah.
Ashley's recounting, and that makes sense as well. But is everybody aware of
Which one takes
what the
precedent?
policy says?
That one or ours?
As long as they have the staff to keep their office open, because that was the issue,
Yeah.
that people were flexing their schedule, so then their office wasn't open to the public during 8 to 4:30 time, because they flexed their time and came in at 7 and closed the office at 3:30. Someone came in from the public at 4 and their office was closed, but it shouldn't have been because the courthouse was open between 8 and
Yeah.
4:30.
Correct.
In other words, if you have a department with a staff of 1, you could never flex.
Right.
But I don't think that this security issue is necessarily a problem. I mean, it sounds like that can be flexed, is what it sounds like. The issue of assigning a security person.
Well, with the proper communication and setup, I agree.
Right, that's what I hear, but what Ashley is pointing out is something that would not be, the only time it would be a problem, well, it would be, Ashley, I think if one person were on vacation.
Right.
One of the two. It would be a problem, you'd have to have someone to be able to cover, so.
And Ashley, if you're going to speak at length today,
yes.
you need to come up to a microphone.
Sorry,
Something happened to
They
our
aren't
TV
hearing
right
you,
now,
right.
too.
they're not on anyways.
You're mad because we said flat.
Now you're back.
But we'd have to, is that, the guys at the front, are they still in the police union?
Yes.
So that's another thing we'd have to really address to see what if they are in the union, we have to look at the union
I
contract.
don't know if they are.
Yeah, I think they are.
Okay,
They are, yeah.
they're considered patrol.
So we'd have to check and to see exactly the verbiage in their contract.
And I will personally ask the sheriff to attend the next property committee meeting for this topic. And we'll go from there. Anything else for the next agenda? And hearing nothing, let's talk about the next meeting date, February, would be the
13th.
second Monday, the 13th, at 8:30?
Sounds good here.
And it's 8:30, not 8, correct?
Yeah.
All right, with that, I will adjourn this meeting at 9:36 a.m. Thank you, everybody.